All right, the agenda for today's call, we're going to give you an overview of who is Medium Giant and who we are on the call. We're going to talk about the problem a lot of brands are facing when it comes to their website and digital experience. We're going to talk through the elements that make a good website. And we're going to talk about now what? When you know the elements and you know the problem, what do you do? What is your next step? And then we believe always in doing a comprehensive audit. So we have some audit tips and tricks for you. And towards the end of the call, we'll share some details on a cool toolkit that we'll be sharing with y'all as well. So, and it's all going to end with a Q&A. So again, direct your questions into the Q&A section, and we'll talk about who is Medium Giant. So we are a media marketing company. We have three pillars of our services: creative and content, intelligence and strategy, and media and technology. We believe that whenever these are all fully integrated, they help ensure your growth. And we use curiosity to kind of drive that, to dig deeper into our clients and the problems they're having. We aren't just vendors, we're partners. We aren't just order takers, we're advisors. We aren't just an agency, we're a marketing consultancy. And with this webinar and a lot of the content we're sharing, we're building a curious community where we're really trying to get out there and share our knowledge with fellow marketers out there, with our clients and non-clients alike, to help us all grow in this market. So let's talk about who's going to be on the call today. I'm your host, Blaine McGaffigan. I am the growth marketing manager here at Medium Giant, and it is my job to kind of highlight the expertise of all of the experts you'll see on the call today, and some you don't, that work at Medium Giant. And this webinar, again, is one of our efforts to share our expertise with everybody out there. So with that, I'll pass it to Rachel.
Hey all, I am Rachel Maynard. I'm the Senior Director of Digital Experience with the Medium Giant. That's my fancy way of saying I lead our UX and web development teams. I am also kind of the product owner of our website work that we do, which is very multidisciplinary. So work with a lot of other subject matter experts within the organization to really spend basically all day, every day thinking about websites, working on websites. I'm going to pass it over to my guy, John.
Welcome, everybody. I'm the Director of Web Development here at Medium Giant, and I've been in the industry since I built my first website in 1996. I've grown along with the web since its infancy, and I lead the team of developers that bring to life the visions of the creative, user experience, content, and SEO teams. And I'm going to turn it over to my man, Andrew Dutcher.
Hello, I'm Andrew Dutcher, technically the Director of Inbound Marketing at Medium Giant, but what that means for me is that I steer our content strategy and SEO teams. So I will come here and try to provide helpful perspective from that lens.
All right, so you heard me mention digital experience. Well, here are three primary ways that we at MG work on digital experiences, such as websites. Evaluation is a really big piece of the puzzle here, and spoiler alert, a really big function of what we're going to talk about with you all today. So evaluation of a digital experience really entails understanding how a current experience is performing, how it's built, how it is fulfilling the needs of your organization and your audience. Creation is probably what you would expect. That's designing and building websites and digital experiences. That also includes things like defining the information architecture of an experience, the content strategy of that experience, QA, quality assurance. That's a really big piece of being sure we're creating something that meets the needs as expected. And then optimization, this is where we talk about like kind of test and learn programs, working on incrementally moving the needle up on the performance of your website against your KPIs and business objectives. And then this office GIF has absolutely nothing to do with anything, but it just reminded me of the graphic and made me smile. So I hope it makes you smile too.
So what do we mean by digital experiences? There's a lot of digital channels out there. What we're really talking about when we talk about digital experiences, really your owned properties. Uh, Definitely your website, which was what we're here to talk about today, but any associated landing pages or your email, really that's what we mean by digital experience.
And as you can see, we work with a lot of different clients and a lot of different verticals. We excel at websites partly because we bring a myriad of experiences from all types of projects to each new client project that we work with. Plus, we're able to share the newly acquired experiences with our existing clients, increasing their ROI while working with us.
And we'd be lying if we said it didn't hurt to be also recognized by awards, but we wanted to share some of the websites who have won some different awards. So on the ends here, you'll find some of our travel and tourism clients that we've built websites for, with the Gold Marcom for Sauk County, Gold AVA Award for Ulster County. And then in the middle, we practice what we preach. We spend a lot of time working on our own website, and we're proud to win the Platinum Marcom and Gold AVA Award. These are just some of the awards we've won for our experiences. So with that, we'll get into it.
All right. So enough about us. We're here to talk about you. I want to dive into kind of maybe the problem state that you're experiencing with your website. You're probably joining this webinar. The way we marketed it was to help you figure out what your next step is with your website. So I'm going to put on my fortune teller hat here, and I'm going to see if I can read your mind a little bit. I want to see if any of these statements resonate with you and kind of some of the pain points you may be having with your own website. So maybe your website is experiencing some kind of decline in metrics that you've been tracking, like traffic or different elements of engagement on your site. And you just don't really know why there's that decline. And maybe you don't even know how to go about figuring out why in order to rectify it. Perhaps you know in your gut that you need to do something with your website, but you're just not sure what. It can be very overwhelming when you're trying to figure out or pinpoint what you need to do. Also, maybe there's something very specific wrong with your website. A good example would be you have a really hard time maintaining it or administering it from a content perspective. Maybe you keep having to have a technical resource help you make any updates at all. That's really frustrating. So maybe you've identified something that's wrong, but you just don't know where to start to improve it. That's what we want to help you with today. And I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to go ahead and diagnose you with website indecision syndrome. And we're going to give you some tools and tactics today to move past this moment of being overwhelmed and not really knowing what to do next. I also want you to feel assured that you're not alone. This is a very common place to be with your website for your organization. Many organizations are experiencing this, being stuck in this cycle of website redesigns. We saw from the poll that we did at the beginning that a lot of you have made these big upgrades or changes to your website within the last 1 to 5 years. And that is aligned with the data around how frequently organizations are redesigning their websites. It averages out at about every 3 years. Now that feels very frequent because it is very frequent. So why are organizations redesigning or replatforming or rebuilding their websites so frequently? It really comes down to the speed that technology and best practices and standards on the web have evolved. And it's been quite a moving target over the past 10 to 15 years. 10 years ago, I was designing and developing websites for mobile that were completely different, like code base from a desktop version of the site. We called them M.dot websites. I'm sure some of y'all are familiar with this. The mobile site was designed and developed as a subdomain as M.dot your domain. Yeah, Google shot that down real quick. Google was not happy with that. And now Google is mobile first indexing. So mobile responsive websites are really the standard, the best practice now. And I do not see that changing anytime soon. So I feel confident that we've reached a place in terms of best practices and web standards that it is possible now to design and develop a website that can be sustainable and flexible and scalable for a good long while, way beyond that 3-year threshold that we've seen over the past 10 to 15 years. And so what's the downside of this cycle, this vicious cycle of website redesigns? Well, it's not a good use of your resources and your time. All of that time and budget that's had to be allocated toward this vicious cycle of redesigns is distracting you from spending that budget on better revenue generating activities. So ultimate goal here is let's stop the cycle, let's cut the cycle, let's get your website to a place where it is sustainable and scalable. Okay, so what? We're like, why should I care so much about my website, at all? Well, some people, myself included, believe that your website is really your hardest working digital experience in your marketing toolbox. And quite frankly, if it isn't helping you and your business, there's a pretty good chance it's actually hurting you. So it's not this neutral thing where you're going to be fine if you have a bad website. It could be hurting your business, in some cases quite significantly. Data shows that 85% of customers use the web as a research tool before they make purchasing decisions. Really high percent there. And 75% of users actually judge a company's credibility, not just your credibility, but the credibility and the quality and the value of your products and services as well, based on your website. So if the quality of your website does not match up with the quality of who you are and what you deliver, it could be really hurting you. Okay, so I do think it can be really valuable to kind of set some standards around what is a good website? What are some facets of a good website that you can think about, especially as you move into hopefully evaluating the current state of your own website? So this here is our website hierarchy of needs that we've created. We fully hijacked this from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Sorry, not sorry. And it follows the same concept that Maslow's hierarchy of needs does, which is that the lower level rows here need to be fulfilled before you move on to these higher level needs. So let me just talk briefly about the different layers of this pyramid. We have accessible as the base of our pyramid. So if your website cannot be accessed across all different types of devices, if it can't be accessed across all different types of screen sizes, and if it can't be accessed by users who are leveraging assistive technology, then you're really doing yourself and your audience a big disservice. And when you think about it, if your website can't be accessed effectively, then nothing else you're doing on your website matters. Okay, now let's move on to functional. That's our next layer of the pyramid here. This is pretty self-explanatory. You want to be sure that your website works. It's not broken. There's no bugs, but also that it's fast. As users of the internet yourselves, you're fully aware of how frustrating it can be when a website or a page loads slowly. So from a customer perspective, it's really important that it loads fast. Pretty much as a rule, conversion rates are higher on faster websites. Also, from a search engine perspective, Google uses page speed as a ranking factor. So if you have a really slow website, it's kind of a ding against you in Google, and it could be hurting where you're ranking in search results for your potential users. Usable is our next layer here. Here's where we get into kind of the fun UX design related aspects of the website. You want to be sure that your website is intuitive, it's well organized, and it's easy to use. There are a lot of well-used web design patterns out on the internet. One that I like to use as an example is on mobile websites, that hamburger menu, that's the 3 lines where you can tap on that and access the navigation. That is a very common web pattern that you can leverage to be sure that users can find and access your navigation very quickly and easily. So when we're assessing the usability of a digital experience, we're looking at, are you following patterns where you should be following patterns? And are you deviating from patterns where it makes sense to deviate from patterns? Sorry, give me a second. All right, meaningful is our next layer here. Here's where content on your website really has a place to shine and have a good impact on your users. So content is really what's able to create a relevant, useful, and memorable experience for your users. So you want to be very intentional about how you're curating and writing and delivering content to meet your users where their intent is and where their mindset is when they're visiting your site. And then impactful, that's our little cherry on top here. This is where we want to think very critically and intentionally about what is driving conversions on your website for you. So sometimes that's a lead form. And the other aspect of impactful in this case would be like creating innovative or delightful features or functions on your site. Animation is something that we get a lot of requests around, and animation on a website can be very, very impactful. But what you want to be careful of is not over indexing on interactive or animated features, because when you have too much, it loses its impact. So, by nature, something that is impactful is something that stands out from the rest. So keep that in mind and don't over index on all the bells and whistles. Now what I want to do is I'm flipping this around, because nothing hits home quite like a funnel for us marketers. And this is what's really going to help you understand how these facets of a website can impact your bottom line, your KPIs, and your business objectives. So you can see here for each of those facets and those layers of the pyramid that we talked about, imagine that like a typical funnel where if your site's not accessible, okay, you're losing X% of users. If your site's not functional, you've lost another X% of users. It's not usable, you've lost another X%. It's not meaningful, you lost another X%. It's not impactful, you lost another X%. So if you can focus very meaningfully and intentionally on all these facets as a whole, you can open up that funnel and be sure you're driving as many users as possible to accomplish what you're hoping they'll accomplish on your website. Okay, so now what? We are supposed to help you understand what the next step is for your website. Going to get a little bit philosophical here for a second. If Hamlet had a website, he would be in the same position you're in. To redesign or not to redesign? That is the question. So I want to help you get to the bottom of really what your best next step is. But I've got a couple of things I want to, be sure we're all on the same page about. Specifically, I want to talk about this kind of back of house, front of house concept as it relates to your website. Your website has at least 2 distinct user types: your front of house user type and your back of house user type. Now, you likely have more than just one front of house user type. You've got lots of different target audiences you're likely working toward, but we're going to simplify that for the sake of this conversation. And I'm using an analogy here like a restaurant. So at a restaurant, you've got the back of house staff. They're back there cooking up the nom noms and they're serving up the food. Let's pretend like the food is content on your website. So the front of house is where your end users are consuming what you're serving up from the back of house. So back of house would be like your content management system, where you've got some folks on your staff logging in, adding content, spinning up new landing pages, keeping your website fresh. And then front of house is where your end users are engaging with your content and your website. So keep those in mind. You're going to hear us talk about front of house and back of house a few times. It's very important. Okay. So the first thing I recommend that you do is do a very thoughtful evaluation of your website from these 2 user type perspectives. Here are 3 activities you can do to get a solid understanding of how good or bad your front of house and back of house experiences are. So first of all, to understand how good or bad your front of house experience is, talk to end users. If you're only talking to your internal stakeholders about your front of house experience, you're missing a big piece of the puzzle because you are not your end user. So we're not going to talk in too much detail within the hour we have together about how to talk to your end users, but we do have a follow-up toolkit where we're going to provide some tips and tricks and even some specific questions you can ask to get to the bottom of that with your end users. Kind of on the other side of that coin, to understand and evaluate the back of house experience that you've got on your website, that's when you want to talk to your internal stakeholders. Talk to the folks who are logging in frequently, who are required and accountable when it comes to updating your website. What are their pain points? There could be a lot of inefficiency there. Again, that time suck and resource suck, that those resources could be spent on more revenue generating activities. So you want to understand what some of those pain points are. Again, we're not going to go into too much detail on how to talk to your internal stakeholders, but we've got that in our follow-up toolkit. Today, what we do want to focus on is conducting an audit. And if you can conduct a really meaningful and intentional audit of your website, that can encompass the full enchilada, the front of house and back of house experiences. Okay, so let's pretend like you've done a really thorough evaluation. You've followed these 3 tracks and you have a good sense of how good your front of house and back of house experiences are. I'm going to go back into fortune teller Rachel mode, and we're going to follow a path here to figure out what your destiny is with your website. So as you can see in our flow chart here, on the left, when you're ready to start, you're going to evaluate the website's current state. I cannot emphasize that any more. Once you have an understanding of how good the front of house and back of house is, you can just follow these paths and figure out which direction is going to be best for you. So if your front of house is good, let's go over to the left here. And now I'm going to ask you if your back of house is good. If your front of house experience is great, got a good grade, your back of house experience got a good grade, congratulations. You can focus on optimizing your website. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about what that means with John here in a minute. If you have a good front of house experience, but a poor back of house experience, that's when we would recommend replatforming your website. You probably need a new and better content management system that fulfills your needs a little bit more effectively. If you did not get a good grade on your front of house experience report, we're going to jump over here to the right side, and we're going to ask again, what about back of house? Okay, if your front of house experience got a bad grade, but the back of house did get a good grade, you got a good platform, a good content management system, then we would recommend redesigning your website, which entails reworking that front of house experience. If you got a bad grade on your front of house experience and your back of house experience, then it's probably time for you to think about rebuilding from the ground up, get you to a place where you do have a sustainable, scalable, and flexible website and platform, so that from then on, you can allocate those resources to the more effective revenue generating activities. Okay, so everybody loves a good 2x2 diagram. I'm just throwing all the marketing things at you. We already talked about a funnel. Now we've got a good old quadrant diagram here. This bottom axis is representative of a positive business impact, low on the left, high on the right. And the axis on the right is representative of the level of effort or resources required, with a low effort being at the bottom and a high effort at the top. So what we've done is we've plotted these different pathways on our 2x2 so that you can get an understanding of, especially compared to each other, what you could expect in terms of investment and, assumed business impact coming out of a project like that. I'm going to pass this over to John, and he will talk us through kind of what each of these means.
So doing nothing, while this amount of effort, it is also coupled with the lowest positive business impact for your company. Once your site becomes stagnant, what incentive do users have to pay you a visit? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I love that quote by Albert Einstein. So that brings us to replatforming. Replatforming is swapping out one backend for another. When your CMS reaches end of life, such as what has recently happened with Drupal 7 and Umbraco 7, you can keep your front of house or the consumer-facing portion of your site while replacing the obsolete back of house with a new CMS. If the team that manages your site content is having difficulty building landing pages, adding or editing new content, or requesting new functionality, replatforming might be the way to go. And then a redesign, it's just that. You keep the back of house or the CMS, that's all working great, and you work on the front of house portion. New content, new visuals, better performance and accessibility are all part of what's possible with a redesign. When your site is easy to use for the team that manages it, but it is dated or has a poor user experience for your end users, a redesign might be exactly what the doctor ordered. And then we get to the most intensive part, is a rebuild. Tearing down the complete house and starting over from the foundation. A new back of house, a new front of house, new content, new everything. While this is the largest level of effort, you can reap the greatest ROI often by starting from scratch. One of the benefits of a rebuild is that you have analytic data now and experience that can teach you what the next iteration of your company's website needs to accomplish, both for you, your end user, and the team that manages it. And then that finally brings us to optimize. Optimizing a website, this is really the sweet spot where you want to be. You've got a great site. Maybe it was built just last year. However, you're not getting the results that you need from it. So you need to make some minor adjustments, do some A/B testing, tweaking performance, updating your accessibility compliance. These aren't major items, but each one of these will help improve the user experience and help increase your ROI from your site.
All right, so we are going to launch a poll, and using what we just walked through, just launched it. I'll give you all around 30 seconds. What is your next step? My website needs to be fill in the blank, rebuilt, redesigned, replatformed, optimized, or still not sure. So give you a couple more seconds to answer those questions.
And of course, you haven't had a chance to evaluate your website between, the last 30 seconds and now. So we're just going to go with your gut here. Go with your gut.
Maynard, would you say we should evaluate the website before we make a decision like this?
Highly recommended, Dutch.
Okay, got it. Just making sure I heard that right.
All right, I'm ending the poll and sharing the results.
Oh.
So we
Nice.
Yeah, for all the answers we have, and thanks again for submitting. 7% said rebuilt, 21 said redesigned, 14% said replatform. That's interesting. Optimize, you love to see it because that's when you can really take it to the next level. And still not sure, well, we want to help you figure out what your next step is so we can keep it moving.
Cool.
All right. Do you want me to dive in? Okay, so let's talk about effective auditing. I think there's more than this, but I think there's 5 main buckets that we want to think about when it comes to an effective audit. I think first and foremost, you think about technical and on-page SEO. You think about content performance. You think about accessibility and page speed. You think about how the site converts and really what that broader user experience is. And then you also think about the back-end usability. How difficult is it for people to create new content, to add features and functionality? So let's get into some details, very tactic focused about what a comprehensive website audit should have. I'll start from the content and SEO side of things. I think it starts with a baseline look at your technical SEO health. Really try to get an understanding of if there's anything from a technical perspective that might be holding your website back from being indexed or ranked on Google. If Google can't I think Rachel said this earlier, if Google can't discover your pages or doesn't understand it, first and foremost, that's probably an issue and it's going to hinder your SEO growth. If you're looking at it from a content performance perspective, you want to look at it from a couple of different lenses. If you're thinking about it from a content marketing lens, you want to conduct an audit to figure out, say you published a lot of content over the years. You want to figure out what content is working really hard for you and what content isn't. Figure out what you can double down on. Also figure out if there's opportunities to optimize. A lot of people don't realize that people get obsessed with creating new content, but there's so much opportunity in optimizing existing content. It's in some ways the fastest way to growth. Also, I think it's important to zoom out a little bit when you think about content performance. You want to look at individual pieces of content, but I think you want to look more holistically than that. So one thing we like to do is look at it at the page type or template level. So an example of this would be how does our collection of product pages perform? How do our collection of category pages perform, or our collection of blogs? It's super important to see at the template level where performance is actually coming in. So maybe if the vast majority of your traffic is coming in through the blog, but you're not seeing traffic come in through product or category pages, that's a problem. And so what that will unlock for you is potential patterns for optimization. You could make single on-page changes all day, but the real growth comes from recognizing patterns where you can apply site-wide or more scalable optimizations to a lot of different pages. And that's where the fun growth comes in. And then lastly, so you've got to after you've evaluated the technical foundation, you figured out what's working and what's not. It's super, super important that you evaluate the opportunity that exists from a channel perspective. So it could come from keyword research or customer research, but you've basically got to see what the total opportunity is so that you can actually build our SEO growth strategy that's going to move the needle.
From a UX perspective, what we like to recommend when you're auditing a website is perform a heuristic evaluation, which is a fancy way of saying really assessing and reviewing the usability of your site. So when we talked about the pyramid earlier, we talked about what makes a site usable, evaluating those aspects. Are you following patterns? Are you not following patterns? Why or why not? Could you also evaluate the accessibility of your current site? There are some great free tools out there that can allow you to scan and understand how compliant your current website is with accessibility standards on the web. We also always recommend look at your site analytics. You can get a lot of information from just exploring the engagement trends and insights from your analytics tools. You can identify kind of how users are behaving currently. Sometimes you can pinpoint specific points of friction that you need to investigate a little bit further through your analytics. And then we also like to recommend running a competitive or comparative website analysis. So look at other websites, not because I recommend you copy other websites. I don't recommend that, but you can sometimes find points of parity or similarities across a large set of websites in terms of maybe how they're organized, how specific elements or actions are labeled, and you can follow those if you feel like it can give you a leg up on your website. Also, looking at other websites can give you a good understanding of where maybe you have a better opportunity to stand out and have a stronger impact on your audience.
And then we get over to the technical checklist. You really want to run a performance scan and evaluate the site speed and opportunities to improve and optimize page loads. Explore your CMS. Understand how easy or difficult it is to add content, remove content, add new features and functionality, and then evaluate your tech stack. Make sure that you're not on an outdated version of a server-side language. Make sure that your platform isn't reaching end of life or coming up on breaking changes that means that that you're forced to do a rebuild. So all of this is something that you need to take a look at as part of this checklist.
So Rachel mentioned a couple of free tools. Let's show you what some of those tools look like. Thinking about accessibility, there's a website that we've got on the screen here that we'll share after. This is just a free tool. We really like it because you can go straight to the website. You can type in a specific page, and it's going to give you a quick rundown of any accessibility issue that might be having. I think one thing that's cool about it too is that it's a little bit interactive too. So sometimes it can be difficult to figure out where these issues are actually persisting. And so that visual element of it is super important. One thing I will say about this is it's just an evaluation point. I think, Blaine, you're trying to speed me up. It's just an evaluation point, or Rachel, just an evaluation point. So you're going to get a lot of things that need to be prioritized. You probably want to work with a technical expert to take this list and turn it into a prioritized, actionable list of things that are going to move the needle. If you're concerned about your website performance, Google offers a page speed insights tool. If you don't know about it, it's completely free, and it actually is super in-depth. It gives a lot of recommendations. I'll just caveat this, and John, as the resident developer on the call, there's a lot of recommendations that Google's going to provide. It's going to give you a score. I would just say don't rush to judgment too quickly based on your score. Still use some common sense. A lot of ththese recommendations, Google doesn't know how your website is built. And so sometimes it spits back recommendations that are oh, we can save 10 seconds, but that recommendation is 65 hours of dev work. And so just make sure that you're working with an SEO and a developer to help you really prioritize the most low-hanging, actionable aspects of this. And don't feel like if you have an 80 that your website's not going to perform. Lastly, search engines. So we talked about technical foundation. You can run SEMrush's free audit tool. You can run a number of different audit tools. I'll give the same caveat. This coming from an SEO, it's going to spit back a lot of red, a lot of yellow. basically going to score you on a number of different factors that may or may not be entirely relevant. They may or may not even be issues. It could be just the way that your site is built. So again, look at this as an evaluation state to get an understanding of the state of the union, but please take something like this and talk to an expert that can help you prioritize the different aspects of this report based on like your own personal need state.
We've also got a few checklists in here for you all to evaluate some of the other facets of your website. Really kind of going back to that website hierarchy of needs and the different layers there. So if you want to do a quick assessment of your website's design and structure and its usability, here are some things we recommend you considering. First and foremost, test it on mobile. 55% plus of web traffic is on mobile devices right now across the web. And that's just going to continue to increase. So I cannot overstate how important your mobile experience is. So be sure that mobile experience is great. Is the text easy to read on your site? Is there a clear hierarchy? If everything on your site kind of looks and feels like it's got the same weight, then it's harder for a user to scan your website and consume that content. Scanning is the primary way that users are reading content on your website. If they scan and find something that interests them, then they will read in detail. But we want to be sure that your site is very easy for a user to scan. Does the design feel dated? This is a very subjective thing that I'm saying here, but I can just tell you, you'll know in your gut. You will know if it feels dated as a user of the web yourself. Is it cluttered? That kind of is related to the hierarchy as well. We don't want to overwhelm users with too many options. When users feel overwhelmed, often they will just abandon and not make any decision at all. That's not what we want. We want them to hone in on a specific path or a couple different paths that meet their needs as well as your business needs. Does the navigation make sense? So you ask yourself if you can find things within your own website. We've had lots of clients who their main complaint is, it's my own website and I can't even find anything on it. It's a very common information architecture problem that can be solved with some thoughtful, IA thinking. And then what are users searching for on your site? If you have on-site search and you're able to track what users are searching for, that is some really valuable information there to help you understand your user's mindset when they're coming to your site. Here's another kind of method that I want to share with you all to determine how meaningful the content on your website is. So my little trick is the who, what, when, where, why, and how question framework to kind of pressure test your website's content. If you can go to your own website, put on an end user's hat, and determine if your website is answering who you are, what you do, what you deliver, when what you do or what you deliver is relevant to that user, where a user is able to access it, why they should care, and then how you accomplish that and how they can get what they need. If you're able to answer all of those in some capacity, you're probably in a pretty good place. If you're not able to answer some of those, then it means you might want to think a little bit more intentionally about what content is on your site and how it's organized. And then this isn't relevant to every website, but thinking about your lead form, that conversion point, if you have a lead form. So first of all, is there a lead form if it's relevant to your business? That could be a big miss if you don't have one. And can users get to it quickly and easily? One of our favorite tactics is on a mobile site. Let's make that call to action that drives to the lead form persistent so that no matter where a user is within their journey on your site, they're ready to make a decision, they have access to your lead form. Is the form understandable? Is it too short? Is it too long? Are we asking for things that don't make sense in what we deliver? Is there content that's reinforcing the value of submitting that form? We want to motivate that user to finish that submission. So how can we reinforce the value of what you have to offer as part of that form experience? And then also, is the form setting expectations about what's going to happen when you submit? Sometimes it feels like a big commitment for a user to submit a lead form. So can we demystify what's going to happen once you submit? We're going to reach out to you within 48 hours. Here's what you can expect.
So that was a ton of information. Thanks, everybody. We're still going to have a Q&A coming up, but I wanted to share that we're going to have a toolkit, and we'll be sharing this out with you. This toolkit has some of this information we've covered, but it also has more details, some questions you can ask your end users to evaluate your front of house that we've talked about, some questions you can ask your back of house, so to speak, your internal stakeholders to evaluate that side of your digital experience. And then it's going to have links to a lot of the resources that we've talked about, as well as additional information. So look for that. I'll be emailing everybody who registered in the coming week or two. So look forward to that.
And listen, if you guys try to do some of this on your own and you need some help, you can always give us a call. So we operate in a couple of different lanes. We love to start with just standalone digital experience audits. Essentially, everything that we've talked about today, we can do for you, and we can help guide your decision-making process as to whether or not you want to completely burn your website to the ground and rebuild it, or if you want to give it a facelift, or if you want to, commit to an ongoing CRO program to help make database iterative improvements to it. So whether it's an audit, whether it's a website strategy, which we firmly believe is critical to any website project, whether it's front-end redesigns, whether it's full-scale development, whether it's CRO programs, we offer a lot, and we can help you.
Okay, and I want to just reiterate a few key points. If you leave today with only 3 things that I've beat you over the head with, let these be those 3 things. So the importance of your website. If it's not helping you, it could be hurting you. We talked about some stats earlier. I feel like that's often not considered. And I want to be sure you guys understand just how critical your website really is to your credibility. Now, if again, like Dutch, FYI, don't forget to evaluate your website. Before you make any big decisions, please conduct an intentional evaluation, even if you're just doing it yourself. And then I also want to re-emphasize the importance of that back of house experience. That is another thing that can get overlooked all too easily. It can be such a huge pain point for the operations of your business, and it can create a lot of inefficiencies, and it's a time and resource suck when it doesn't have to be. So be sure you are really thinking about that back of house experience as well.
Awesome. So we're going to get into the Q&A. I'm looking at the time, see we have 8 minutes. So we'll, I see some questions coming in. I'm going to invite Lance to field those questions and help us out here, and let's take it away.
All right. So our first question is, my website is for a niche audience. How do I specifically reach that audience? What we'd like to ask that person, if they'd like to chat back in, is could you give us a little more color around what that niche audience might be? And while we let that happen, we have a couple more questions.
Yeah, if not, if you guys, I could probably answer that more broadly, if we want to just go that route.
Yeah, you want to give a
okay, so a
off the
couple of
top answer?
challenges. I don't know what the niche audience is, but the answer to this is almost always qualitative customer research. So if you have a niche audience, you're not going to be able to rely on traditional keyword research. You're probably not going to be rely on third-party data around who this audience is. The best course of action is to always conduct qualitative interviews. Ask them what their pain points are. Ask them the problems that they have. If they are current customers of you, like I don't know what industry it is, but ask them, what problems do you solve for them? What is your value proposition to them? how do they go about making buying decisions? How do they go about researching? You see what I'm getting at? Because this information will be what you illuminate your homepage with. It'll be illuminate what pages you build on your website. It'll illuminate what content you need to create and where you need to distribute it. To me, that is the centerpiece of any strategy at all, but especially true if you have a very niche vertical.
Also sometimes referred to as voice of the customer, right? So voice of the customer can come in a lot of different ways, and this one's very qualitative and high touch. Okay, next question. How do you convince upper management to actually get a project like this started? Anywhere you'd recommend we start?
Ooh, yeah, that's a really good question. And Lance, you may have some, as our resident biz dev, you may have some tips here. So I would recommend if there are any ways you can identify existing pain points so that you can point to specific things that are having a negative impact on your business. I'm going to talk about the back of house again for a second. If you can identify how much time maybe is spent on inefficient activities related to keeping your website up to date, you have some numbers then that you can point to and say, wouldn't it be great if 70% of this time was actually spent doing XYZ instead?
Yeah.
Go on, Dutch.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think it's important to speak the language of your leadership. So you've got to understand what is meaningful to them, what metrics are meaningful to them, and you've got to approach it like a business case. And so there's a couple of different ways that you could do it. I think Rachel was going from the efficiency standpoint. If you're spending, if you've got a ton of resources in place, and we're actually working with an existing client on a very similar project right now. If you've got a website that's obviously operating inefficiently, you can point to that both from a quantitative perspective of like the website's not converting at the benchmark level that it should be, which is a good thing to be able to point out, or to Rachel's point, the time spent or the inability to lift off and launch new features and functionality. But what I would try to do is get at like a lot of leadership wants to can look at this in the dollars and cents. They want to look at it from a revenue perspective. And so if you can do whatever you can, whether that's isolating the gap in revenue that you're getting from a missed benchmark of conversion, or if you can isolate the opportunity, say from an SEO perspective, to drive X amount of traffic into the site and equate to what that would mean for the business, that's how you get those types of initiatives off the ground, in my opinion.
I think well said, both of you. Rachel, what you said to me sounded like back of the house, and Andrew, I think your response was very front of the house.
Which that makes sense.
Yeah, what are the business results that the front of the house of the website is driving, right, for the target audiences, and where are the drop-offs, and what's the missed opportunity, and that's your business case. All right, next question.
Can I add just one more thing?
Of course.
From a budgeting perspective, we looked at that 2x2, and it's not a small level of effort. It's not a small investment. And so that is sometimes a really difficult conversation to have and to broach with your leadership. But something that sometimes what we recommend is kind of identify the value of a new customer to yourself. And if there's a way to equate, like, okay, if we rebuild our website, that costs X amount of dollars to rebuild. And, but we find that all we're going to need is to get 3 new customers for that website to pay for itself. There you go. It's always a great thing to add to your business case.
For sure. All right, we have 2 more questions. We'll do these as a rapid fire as we close out. So first up, how useful is Google My Business in optimizing my website?
Well, first, it's called Google Business Profile now. Google's constantly like rebranding. That's just relatively recently. I think there are a couple of different ways, and I could answer this question probably 3 different ways. There's really no direct way that Google My Business can be optimized for your website, but it's important if you are, for instance, like a click and mortar restaurant, or a click and mortar could be a restaurant or a type of business where you have a bunch of different locations, and you have also maybe e-commerce, it's important to find integration points between all of those things. How those things might integrate. I know over the pandemic, one of the big things we did for a lot of our big retail clients was shifting into buy online, pick up in store, or curbside pickup. Super, super important. And in that way, you actually have to really integrate the Google Maps listing essentially with your website experience. And so one of the big things that we did was where that entry point was happening, how do we optimize the front end experience on Google to have the type of messaging to show customers that they can pick up in store, but then also when they launch into the website, is that experience tailored to the location that they're at, both from a location perspective, or even if they were to actually start shopping e-commerce, does that carry all the way through from like the local Google listing to adding to a shopping cart? So I don't know if that was exactly how the question was posed, but that's how I answered it.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
All right, our final question. So the best tips to redirect social posts and information to the website and inquiry. I'm reading verbatim.
Say that.
The way the
Say
question
that. Is that me again? I don't know. Say it again. All right.
The best tips to redirect social posts and information to the website and inquiry. We could probably do the back part of that with getting people the information they're looking for and helping them make inquiries. You know, how do you troubleshoot your efficiency in that realm?
I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure I completely understand the question. To take this one, Lance, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, I mean, reading that question, it brings me to mind of what y'all spoke about on one of the slides about just digging in on your analytics, right? So where are the drop-offs? Where are you losing people? Building those goal paths and funnels to understand, like, who are the people that are not making it to my contact form or my inquiry page, and where is that occurring and why?
Well, and I'd have a little bit on here as well. One of the best tips that I can give you about your social posts is to make sure that you've got a clear call to action. I mean, if you're just giving a post and it doesn't have a clear call to action, then you're losing that audience right there. So make sure that there is an action at the end of your post. So that's just the tip that I would provide for.
I love that.
How to redirect from your social post directly to your website so that people can learn more about you.
And once somebody's on your website, let's say submitting your lead form, and this is one that's near and dear to our Dutcher, is self attribution. So include a question on your form of where did you hear about us? That'll give you a good understanding of, okay, are people coming from social, or where are they meeting us out on different channels and finding their way here and engaging with us?
Great.
Yeah, well, super, super important, because they just released a study that attribution from social media channels is almost entirely dark. So you can't rely on traditional analytics platforms to determine efficacy from your social channels. You also, a lot of people don't really want to click off of social experiences anymore. And so it's not really, they're more discovery channels. They're not today drivers of website traffic. So that's a broad statement, but attribution of social in general can be super, super nebulous. So yes, the self-reported attribution, or even like if it's a B2B business, like following up, evaluating the deal that just came through, do one less analysis, ask your customers, how did you find us? You'll uncover a lot of really powerful things there. Maybe we'll do a webinar on attribution.
There you go.
Well, listen, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. We hope you learned something. Feel free to reach out, ask us any questions. We're always looking to help. And stay tuned, because we are going to have more webinars launching in the future. And look for your inbox, because we'll be doing a follow-up with this recording and deck, as well as the toolkit. So thank you for attending, everybody. Y'all have a good one.
Everybody.
Bye.